Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And we interview Asian entrepreneurs around the world to amplify their voices and empower Asians to pursue their dreams and goals.
We believe that each person has a message and a unique story from their entrepreneurial journey that they can share with all of us.
Hey guys, welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. My name is Brian.
And my name is Maggie.
And today we have Tammy Cho. Tammy is the CEO and founder of BetterBrave. She's also the co-founder and CEO of HATEISAVIRUS. Tammy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming on this show, Tammy.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Super excited to have you, Tammy. So can you start off by telling us, what was your upbringing like? Where did you grow up? What kind of Asian-style parents did you have? We want to hear a lot more about that.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. Yes, I grew up in Orange County, California. Basically all my childhood and life. And then I moved to DC to attend Georgetown University. And then the tech life brought me out to San Francisco for about 5 years. And then now I'm based out in LA officially.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what about your family? Would you say that they're very a traditional family? Did they have a life that was kind of set out for you? Did they envision you to go through a certain route, or were they very supportive in anything that you wanted to do?
That's a really good question. My parents were immigrants from South Korea. So they had moved to America just a couple years before I was born, and they were small business owners. So they ran dry cleaning businesses and then a liquor store for most of my childhood. So I basically grew up in a liquor store. And in terms of career paths and decisions, life decisions generally, I think they were a lot more traditional. So I think because they wrestled with the challenges of being a small business owner and knowing how challenging that is, they definitely envisioned a better life for us.
Right.
And that better life was very much tied to the traditional stable career paths of becoming a lawyer or becoming a doctor. And so those were definitely the paths that my parents encouraged me to follow growing up, and were definitely not the paths that I ended up taking. Yeah.
And so before you had started all of these amazing companies, were you doing something before you went into the nonprofit world? Or, did you ever have a 9-to-5?
Yeah, so I started my first company as a college student at Georgetown.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was working on different startup projects. I didn't really know what the tech world or what startups even were at the time when I was in high school. But I actually started working on startups technically when I was in high school. And then when I got to college, I ended up teaming up with a couple of friends to just start the side project. And for me, I was just thinking about it as I really care about this problem. It seems like with our team members, we might be able to do something to solve it. And so we kind of just started hacking away at the problem. And before we knew it, we were sharing our idea, trying to get feedback from our mentors at the university. And they actually pointed out to us that this idea really had some potential.
Yeah.
Wow.
So our professors then start to introduce us to other investors as well as other mentors. And those conversations, there were quite a few. We've probably had hundreds of conversations at that point, but that ultimately enabled us to be able to apply to an accelerator program and get accepted to actually focus and work on the startup.
That's amazing. And for a frame of reference, this is back when you were 18? You're 18?
Yeah, 17, 18.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. What was that mindset like? Feeling that your idea could become realistic and that you guys are working with investors. What was going through your mind at the time?
Yeah. Funny enough, I think that there is something to the being naive at that point where I think I knew I was young. I recognized that I was young. But I think, and being young, like I knew that there was so much for me to learn. And I think having that open mind and that willingness to learn from mentors and other members of our community, other founders, I think actually ended up being a strength in terms of being able to work on this company. I've definitely had a fair share of challenges related to the fact that I was so young, that we can dive into a bit later too. But I think there was a lot of really grateful for the startup community for supporting us as college entrepreneurs too.
Yeah, that's amazing, And as you're going through this process, like, what were your parents thinking about you being a part of this business?
Yeah, my parents didn't take it very seriously when I first started working on it. And well, to be honest too, I think, seeing how hard my parents had worked to provide for us, we didn't grow up with much. And I knew like how hard it was on them, how difficult it was running this business. And so when I saw that, I basically made this like commitment with myself. It wasn't any pressure from parents, but that I wanted to be able to, once I go to college, like be able to provide for myself. And so I got a full ride to Georgetown, and then any other expenses that I had, I basically took on like 5 different odd jobs to pay the bills while I was there. But basically I like took a very independent approach once I hit college, and I didn't want my parents to worry. So I think I played a role in downplaying what I was working on initially. And so I framed it to them as like, oh, here's like a little side project that I'm working on with friends. And, it might be a business, but like, we're kind of seeing how things go. And so, they were initially supportive because they didn't really know what I was doing, but they just assumed it was like some fun side project I was doing on with friends that was semi-productive. But then fast forward some time, I actually had to come back to them to break the news that I was going to be leaving school to focus on this company full time. And that's when things completely shifted. My parents were, obviously supported it as a side project, but after realizing that this is something I might be leaving school for, definitely shifted their world a bit. And that was a very challenging time for us to figure out what to do next.
Yeah. Was there like a transition period where you were like, okay, I need to focus on one thing, right? Like school might be taking up too much of my time, and maybe I need to leave and, put 100% into my business that I'm working on.
And to take it back one more step too, like, what is your opinion of school? I feel like that sort of played into your decision to leave. As you're meeting more entrepreneurs out there, you're starting to realize like, hey, look, there's so much more to be learned in the real world compared to school,
Yeah, that's a good question and kind of controversial, but I think in terms of my perspective on school, I definitely have mixed feelings in regards to it. And it was, I do see the value of school for some, and then for others, maybe school potentially might not be the best path, or maybe there's ways that like education generally can be improved to cater to people who might break out of school because it doesn't align with them. I would say like it was interesting for me too because I went to a public school in Orange County, but it was a unique model where you had to test to get in to attend this high school, middle school, high school combination. And it was very, very focused on academics. And like all that you think about is how to get good grades, how to have like a great, testing score so that you can get into these universities. These top tier universities. And that's where everybody's head was at, including mine at the time. And so to realize that I spent all of this time working towards getting to a university and then coming to a point where as I'm attending school and working on this project, I realized that, like there's just no way I can do both. And I think part of the reason was because one, academics, I also am, for Enneagram, for people who know Enneagram, I'm type 3, I'm an achiever. And so if I put my heart into something, like I want to excel at it. And so for me, I think for schoolwork, there was a part of me, if I was working on it, I want to be able to dedicate all the time to it and get good grades. Right. But at the same time, on the other hand, I'm working on this project. I truly believe in the potential of this to kick off, and that is solving a real need. And I find myself dedicating so much time to it as well. Yeah. And I was working 70-hour work weeks, basically 80-hour work weeks, to try to fit both the company as well as school at the same time. And so I was already feeling I was already thinking about I feel like I probably should pick one to focus on for now. And then the tipping point was actually because we were then able to raise funding from a round of funding from angel investors, and raised over $250,000 for this initial round. So that was the tipping point for me to make a decision on, am I going to stay in school and give up the startup, or am I going to focus on the startup full time and then take a break from school?
Wow, that's a powerful story, and it's so powerful, especially for us in the Asian hustler community, to hear this, because a lot of us give up on our startup ideas while in college. A lot of us may or may not been able to create super companies in college because we listen to our parents. And the safe path is to stay in school, get good grades, get a job first, and then figure out your company, And because your story is so unique that, you have such a hustler mentality that you came into college and you're like, hey, I want to make sure my parents are not paying for anything. If I had to work random jobs, I want to make sure I stay fully independent. That's really powerful too. And what makes it even more unique is, your courage. Your courage to stand up for what you believe for and go for it. And look at where you are now. A lot of people want to be where you are right now. They want to be Tammy Cho. They want to experience things that you experienced too, because in our opinion, I always feel like, a lot of us follow the traditional path, right? We go to college, get good grades, graduate, get a good job. And then we find ourselves sort of depressed. Because it's oh man, I have a lot of people in the Asian Hustle Network always say, I never lived life the way I wanted to. And by that time, it's in their late 20s, early 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, right? And you've shown that, hey, you could succeed in an unconventional path. And I absolutely agree with you with the education perspective. I feel like the education system is not for everyone. It really depends on you as a person. What kind of type are you? And your type. You're the achievement type. You know that you don't need to have someone tell you what to do, because you know what to do. And that's so powerful for people to hear this story and to sort of emulate you walking forward, that there's more than one path to succeed in life instead of one. Our parents are so dead set on us being doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, that they forget about us being happy, that America is truly the land of opportunity, that there's so much opportunity out there that you just have to go for it and pursue it.
Yeah.
So I had props to that, Tammy.
Yeah. And I think it's really powerful too, because, a lot of people, they like to dip their toes in a lot of different areas, but they burn themselves out, and if you're giving 50% into something and 50% into another thing, you never truly give your 100% into one thing. And I like that you were able to make that realization, I have to focus on my business because I want to see it grow, and in a lot of cases, people miss out on those opportunities. They'll be like, hey, I feel like I need to finish school because my parents want me to finish school. And what if they had that opportunity, right next to school, but they missed it while they were in school,
Yeah,
So.
I'm pretty sure a lot of us can relate to the fact that, oh man, I had the idea when I was in college, but I didn't pursue it because I was scared, myself included. There's a lot of different ideas that I saw blow up. I'm like, God, I was thinking about that back in college. But yeah, I kind of want to transition and dive into your experience of being such an early founder. You found a company at 17, 18, how'd you meet your co-founders? How'd you vet them? And like, what was your experience like raising money as a female entrepreneur that's pretty young?
Yeah. On top of that, being female and a member of minority too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was definitely challenging. One quick thing I did want to add to your last points though was just in regards to testing. I do think it is important to test out different fields that you might be interested in. Because I think that's oftentimes the first step, right? Like even for me, I was a college student, and on the side, I started working on this company. And from then, I think I was then able to realize over time that this is something I want to shift my focus fully onto. And I think one of the things that stop people too is it just stops the idea, right? And you get scared about the execution. But I think if there's anything that I can share that I've learned from my experience is that if you just take that one step, even if it's as a side hustle, you may never know where it leads. You might drop it, and that's fine too. Like you may never follow through with it, and that's okay. You realize it's probably because you realize that it's not worth pursuing further. But on the other hand, you might realize that's something that you want to focus on for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing feeling.
And then in regards to the starting a company as a college entrepreneur, that was really a huge learning experience for me. And as I mentioned, I didn't know anything about the tech industry or the startup world because, we almost fell into it because we were just, listening to the advice of our mentors, being open-minded and pivoting according to the advice that we were receiving. And we only then, after starting to work on this company, found the label of like, oh, we're actually working in a startup in tech.
I didn't know.
Yeah. But in a way, I think that was one of the strengths for us too, just being, because we were truly just focused on like, how can we execute rather than getting caught up in like, oh, I want to be this cool entrepreneur in like the hot new industry. We were just really just trying to figure out how can we address these issues. And the challenges that I did come across being a young founder and also being a woman and a person of color was there were definitely a lot of microaggressions that I experienced in the industry. And so I had two incredible male co-founders, Felipe Lopez, who was our CTO, and James Lee, who was the CEO of the company. And they're wonderful. But, when we went to, for instance, startup events and we were exhibiting Encore Alert, our company, there'd be little things like the VCs that would walk by our booth would first talk to me. They'll immediately assume that I'm an intern. And then when they realize I'm a founder, they'll kind of ask like, do you have any other founders? And you can clearly tell their mood and the way they talk shifts when they're talking to a male founder. Another clear example was even in regards to a fundraising process, when VCs were reviewing how much equity each of the founders have. They oftentimes wanted to push my equity down among the three founders. And the reasons they would cite would be reasons like, for instance, the fact that I was a college dropout made them concerned. Which is fair in one sense, but on the other hand, you also see a lot of male founders who've dropped out of college, and then that's actually seen as a positive, right? People describe them as like the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Bill Gates. And meanwhile, it's a red flag for me, for a founder. And so those are a lot of the challenges or just some of the challenges that I had experienced being in the industry. And, and I think it was only over time, being in the industry for so long, I finally started to have conversations with other female founders and recognize that this was actually a very common behavior. And even especially in regards to the equity gap, for instance, research studies actually show that female founders oftentimes have less equity than their male co-founders. And there's a huge gap. They call it the equity gap in that regards. And that applies to employees as well. So when male employees are more likely to have higher equity than female employees.
Yeah, that's really disheartening to hear, you know, especially you coming as a co-founder. You know, I feel like you did your equal part, you know. You didn't step back, you didn't step down, did you? Did you like stand your ground and be like, no, what are you talking about? I deserve my equal share.
I'm wondering like how you were able to react to those type of instances, and like if you ever said anything, or if it was like more of like a self-affirmation kind of thing, like just don't mind them, you know, do your own thing. Like how were you able to respond to those type of comments?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a huge learning experience for me. I did not, to be honest, take much action against that. And I think I was one of the very few female founders in the DC tech scene at the time. There's probably like 2 or 3 female founders that like were consistently at these events. And they're incredible, but there were very little of us. And this was not a topic at the time that we discussed as much. And so I actually felt very isolated and alone in that. You know, my co-founders were supportive, but I think I didn't even know how to really verbalize how I was feeling about this. And at the time, it was even hard for me to realize what was wrong. It just felt off. But a lot of it, I took it upon myself, where I felt like, oh, I was the problem. And I almost felt like I was bringing the rest of the team down because I was on the team. And, you know, and when they suggested pulling the equity down, I didn't fight back because because I think I voiced that it felt off to me, but then at the same time, I think I didn't really know, you know, like I just gave them benefit of the doubt, and I didn't want to pose like any additional barriers in terms of securing funding for our team. And so kind of took it as like, take one for the team and decrease my equity. You know, fast forward to where I am now, like, hell no, that's not going to fly with me, right? But and I've learned so much of that. And I think that experience is one of the huge reasons behind why I work on the initiatives that I do today as well. But it was definitely a learning experience for me.
I think it's very easy to, you know, even if you're young or if you're not, like if you're a person of color, a member of a minority working in the workforce, and you see that you have a lower salary than the other person who may be like white, you know, it's very easy to be like, you know, maybe I'm not doing my part. Maybe I'm, you know, putting the team down. Maybe I need to do more, right? So I think it's very easy to kind of get those two ideas mixed up and, you know, put it on yourself, right? But I think now, like, fast forwarding to now, we see, you know, with BetterBrave, like BetterBrave was started with all women, right? And I think that's really important. And I think, you know, you coming to that realization and you coming back, bouncing back with a company that's like full of women, I think that's really powerful.
And to just build on top of that too, I'm very, very mad hearing this story, you know, because if I was your co-founder at the time, I'd be like, hell no one's decreasing Tammy's share. Just the way I am in general, you know, but I'm really sorry that happened. And I think that even for us working towards Asian Hustle Network, we have this huge initiative to empower women entrepreneurs inside the community. And any way that we could support through AMA sessions, you know, the last couple winners that we gave away $1,000 to have been female entrepreneurs. You know, it's a strong initiative for us. I mean, I always felt like, this is a funny story. I always felt like back in school, girls are so much smarter than me academically. I'm like, man, it must not be that smart, man.
They are.
No, but I'm really happy, like, you're okay now. Like, you learned from that mistake, that you're using this experience to build forward and never let this happen again. And I do want to dive a little deeper into, like, how you found your co-founders. Like, how did you vet them? How did you meet them? Like, what kind of prior relationships did you have with them before you started working together?
Yeah, so one of my co-founders I knew since high school, actually. So we were part of the same business organization. And so He was a few years older than I was, but we're in the same business organization and got connected one of the summers because he was starting a different company at the time. And so I, over the summer, while like everyone else was doing like SAT prep, funny enough, it was like too expensive for me to attend these like prep academies. And that's why I like looked for other projects to work on.
Yeah.
So it was a blessing in disguise. And I came across this opportunity to work with this friend. And then we ended up working on that for about, I believe it was about 2 summers. And then by that time, it was around the time for me to go to college. And I ended up going to Georgetown University, which was the same university that he was at. And so then we continued to work on different ideas together and ended up landing on one, which was Encore Alert. It was a different idea at the time, but what it eventually evolved into was it was a social media analytics platform where we basically were able to smartly identify, look through all the social media data for these big brands and identify key opportunities and issues, PR crises that they need to address as soon as possible, and would send them alerts. But teamed up with this founder, this friend, to start that. And then we needed to find someone who was technical to be able to build the product as well. And so how we found our third co-founder was actually through a platform called AngelList.
I love AngelList.
Yeah. It's a great platform. I haven't used it since, but so many years back. But yeah, we posted on this platform where it connects founders to other people who are interested in roles in tech. And a few different people responded, including Felipe Lopez. We then jumped on a call with him. I'm not even sure if at the time he like realized we were college students in our dorm rooms, just interviewing people. But we jumped on a call with him. We ended up doing a short-term contract with him just to see how we can work well together or not. And, by the end of that period, we knew that he was the one. We worked really well together. He was incredibly smart, just in terms of the way he thinks about just technical infrastructure and architecture was what we were looking for. And so we ended up teaming up after that. And then shortly after, we got accepted into another startup accelerator program that required all of us to be present live in person in DC. And so Felipe was actually based out of Brazil. So we flew him from Brazil to DC for this program. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really cool, just to hear about like how things come about. Most challenges that early entrepreneurs start, especially if you're not technical, is how do you find a technical co-founder? And most ideas die right there. It's like, oh, I can't start this project because I don't have a technical co-founder. But you guys figure out a way to do it because you're so passionate about the idea that you want to start, that you found a way to do it, and that's amazing, and just be able to start thinking about solutions instead of problems. That's a gift in its own, like when you can start looking at what you currently have, what you're missing, how to find it. That's when you start solving the problems, and that's how you become a true entrepreneur.
Yeah. We always talk about how like finding a co-founder, it's like marrying that person, right? It's
like
pretty much
dating that person.
Yeah, it's like dating. Yeah. But, I think the best people who work together most efficiently and the best is like you guys are on the same page and you guys are seeing the long-term vision. Obviously there are arguments that happen, but that's always like short-term. Those are always temporary.
They're never personal too with co-founders because you are going to have disagreements. And I find that when working with a team, if things go too well, that means things are swept under the rug. And nothing, that means there's bigger underlying issues that's going on.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, I do want to talk a little bit more about like some of the early mistakes that you made. I know one of them was lowering your equity, which I'm still very mad about, by the way, to hear about that. But we just want to hear a little more about like other mistakes and lessons learned that we can take away from your experience?
Yeah. I think another big lesson that we learned over time, just based off of like very early projects that we're working on. So I think that sometimes there's a tendency, especially among founders and even like creatives, where we get really excited about an idea, but it's not necessarily solving a real problem. And we get more with this idea than figuring out how we're trying to address a major issue that's going on. And so I think that's one of the lessons that we learned, which was to really try to identify the needs of who we're trying to serve, and then build a product around that rather than the other way around. And the reason I say that too is because there were definitely, when we first entered the accelerator program in DC, it was a 4-month long program. The first 3 months you're basically, and during the bulk of the program, you're basically paired with different mentors. You're working on your concept idea. And the goal is by the end of that period, you then pitch your company to a bunch of different VCs and angel investors to get funding, to get actual seed funding. And, when we first went into this program, they actually gave us funding saying that they are giving us funding because they believe in the team, not necessarily the idea. And the major flaw with the idea was that we were building a great solution that we felt like was brilliant, but in actuality, it wasn't really solving a huge need that people would be willing to pay for. And so during that program, we quickly pivoted. We pivoted basically like a month before we had to pitch to the VCs.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a madhouse, super stressful, but also really rewarding. And then within that month, we were able to build a very simple first version of the product. And we pitched it to prospective customers and were able to get them to commit to a contract all before a fundraising day. And so then when we actually pitched the concept that day, we had VCs and investors that were interested in funding us, and we were able to raise more money after that and have actual customers.
Yeah.
Sounds like it happened so quickly.
I know. I think a lot of people get like the shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to do this, you want to do that, like that's the next fad, right? But people don't do like market research. Like, is it actually going to solve an issue that people are experiencing, or is it just like something you want to focus on? But I'm glad to hear that you guys were able to pivot in such a short amount of time.
And shout out to our friend Patrick Lee for telling us to focus. One of those times where we just need to focus. But I mean, fast forward a little bit more, like when you guys sold your company, at the age of, I'm pretty sure acquisition happened around when you're 20, finished here in 21, right? And what was that process like? And what was that feeling like when you're about to sell this company? And why did you sell the company?
Yeah. So that was a very interesting time for us as well. We were going through our second accelerator program called 500 Startups out in the Bay Area. And close to the end of that program, the CEO of Meltwater, which is the company that acquired us, happened to be speaking at 500 Startups to the entrepreneurs there. And we were doing introductions. And when he heard about what our product was, you instantly see his eyes light up, because I think it was a product that he internally was very interested in building out. And then realizing that a product like this was already in the works made him very excited. And from there, things initially moved pretty quickly. We set up an initial conversation with them, which was meant to be just exploring partnerships with them, not necessarily acquisition. So we had a partnership meeting, introduced our product. They introduced their company as well. And that's how the conversation started. Pretty soon, it was more apparent that they were interested in acquiring our company. And from there, it became a discussion internally about what we want to do next. Did we want to raise another round of funding to continue working on this company privately? Or did we want to merge and be acquired, or did we want to be acquired by Meltwater during this time? And there are a couple different factors that we looked at for this. One, I think we wanted to get a better idea. It required a lot of self-reflection too, right? But we needed to think about, like, in terms of our respective life visions, did we see ourselves working on this company forever, and this mission forever, or was there something else that we might want to explore down the road? We also had to evaluate where we were as a company. And to be honest, at the time, we weren't doing fantastic, right? Like we had 10 employees at that point, but it was still, and we had a great product. We had, all the customers that signed up for our product. We had very little churn and turnover, but in terms of acquiring new customers, that was not necessarily a strength from our team. And so we felt like potentially this might be a good time for us to transition this to a more established company, so that, one, we know that they have the sales bandwidth and the knowledge to be able to distribute our product to the right customers. And then two, we could also learn from that experience of how they do that. And also learn from the experience of being acquired and what that transition looks like as well. And so, and then the last piece that we looked at was the offer, and the arrangement was structured in a way that we can continue to operate our product under this new company, which is actually unique, because a lot of times you'll find acquisitions where they'll either dissolve. It's more like an acqui-hire, where they just hire they like technically acquire the company, but those employees just join as an employee and work on the new company's products, and then they basically have to abandon ship for their startup product. But for us, we were in this unique position where we could actually, as a team, join Meltwater and operate our own product within their umbrella. And so, considering all of that, we had many conversations with the team about it, and then decided to take the path of acquisition.
Wow. That's amazing. Congratulations, by the way.
Congratulations. At age 21, that's amazing.
I know, that's really amazing. It's really inspirational to hear. It's about, because everything to us, like it sounds like everything happens so quickly in a 3 to 4 year range. About who you are, from basically a high schooler, to your ideas of what's possible, to defying your parents, to taking this risk, to leaving college, just moving to San Francisco to start this company and then getting acquired. Like that's really amazing, and obviously you're full-time right now doing BetterBrave and co-founder of HATEISAVIRUS. Like, what made you decide to leave Meltwater and start a new venture? Because for most people, you went through their entire life goal in 4 years. So the question after you achieve your goal is always like, okay, what makes me happy? What's next? You really want to dive into that mindset too at the time. That what made you want to leave this, essentially a really great opportunity, decent paying job, and really comfortable life, to go out there and do this over again and figure yourself out and find new co-founders.
Yeah. And, like, in speaking about BetterBrave, like, how were you able to come up with that, idea, and what was like the inspiration behind it? And were you already thinking about it when you were at Meltwater? Or,
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna, how did that idea transpire?
Yeah, I also want to understand, like, what's your mental health like at the time too? Because I feel like mental health is one thing that's never quite talked by the Asian community. And in the exterior, it may seem like a lot of us are doing really well. You sold your company, or a lot of us have nice jobs, nice cars, or whatever. But we're just feeling unhappy inside. And you tell your parents this, and they're like, what? You left this, now you're leaving that? What do you want?
Yeah, all good questions. And that was such an interesting period of my life too. So much had happened in like the 2 year span. So once I was at Meltwater, that was also a really cool experience, just getting to learn about how a bigger company operates, like $100 million company. They have thousands of employees around the world. And there's so much that we learned in terms of how to operate a business during our experience there. With that said, I think, as I was working there, and I believe that there's value in the product, I did think a little bit more in terms of my life vision and what I care about. And I think I hit a point where I realized, I was starting to realize that I don't see myself, doing social media analytics forever as much as it's needed. I don't see that as my calling. And so I was starting to think about what are some other areas that I might be more interested in focusing on. And this was not something I was actively looking for. Yeah. That was in the back of my head. Yeah. And then in July, I believe it was July 2017, around that time, beginning of 2017, I had come across a story of Susan Fowler over at Uber. For those who don't know, she was a software engineer at Uber. She had reported numerous incidents of sexism, harassment, bullying at Uber. Every time was met by HR saying that there was nothing they can do because hers was the only complaint. Yeah. Turns out that there were dozens of other people who were also affected by this behavior. Yeah. And, when I saw her story, I realized that I wasn't alone in my experiences. I think, as I mentioned before with the whole equity conversation too, I think in the moments that I experienced these microaggressions or the sexism or the racism, I almost took the blame on myself rather than evaluating what was wrong about the situation. And so when I saw her story and realized that I was not alone and that many other women were experiencing these type of issues, I felt compelled to do something. And I didn't know what it was going to be honest, but the first step that I took was, again, just really trying to understand this problem and where it stems from. And so I ended up teaming up with one of my coworkers at the time to interview people. We just had hundreds of conversations with other women and men, people, employees, lawyers, HR experts, just to get a better idea of their experiences in the workplace. And every single person that we talked to either had a personal experience with this issue or they knew somebody who experienced harassment in the workplace. And, hearing all these stories is just impossible. I mean, to not do anything about it. And so we looked at what is a gap that we see? Why is this happening? And we realized one of the first places that we can start was address this huge gap in terms of the knowledge that employees have in terms of what their workplace rights are, as well as how to navigate these issues. Because the resources that are currently out there to help you understand this are very expensive. And most of the people who are affected don't have the money to afford those resources and consequently can't take any action. So taking all of that, basically it became the foundation and inspiration behind BetterBrave.
Yeah, I think BetterBrave is super essential right now. I mean, I have worked at places before where my female coworkers came up to me and be like, hey, I was sexually harassed. And then we tried talking to HR and everything, and nothing really happened. I was pretty upset about that. It's a very common thing, especially in Silicon Valley, to hear about these type of stories.
Yeah. And you're constantly told, whether it's in the media or through just your community, that, you should report these issues to HR and they should take care of it, but they don't do anything.
Yeah. I remember back in 2017 when that story came out regarding Uber, all of these other stories kind of just started coming up, from random people, whether they be women or men. And then other companies, employees from other companies started coming out with their stories too. And it just became a ripple effect and a movement, right? But then no one like very few people talk about it because you know there's just like this pride issue, like they don't want to talk about it, and they feel like tell me about how, you know, employers don't really give the resources, like during onboarding they don't address that type of issue, right? Like they don't say like, if this and this happens to you, this is what you need to do, you know. And I love that BetterBrave is able to offer those resources.
Yeah. Like, even for us, as we incorporate Asian Hustle Network, we're going to reach out to BetterBrave for more resources, you know.
Please do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that, by the way. And I think now's a great time to talk about, you know, the very new initiative, you know, that you're a part of. Hate is a Virus.
Yes. Alongside you.
Yeah, so Brian is part of Hate is a Virus and Tammy is part of Hate is a Virus, and it's been...
I'm the visible partner. You know, it's obvious that, you know, Tammy and Michelle are the true beasts here.
It's so funny because we always I always see Brian doing these videos, obviously, right? And it always takes him like a couple tries, but he's always like, oh, how does Tammy do it? Like, it's so, she does it like with no mistakes and it's always so eloquent. Yeah, but I mean, I guess the question coming from me is like, what has been your experience with Hate is a Virus? And, you know, the whole movement is just so incredible, and just seeing the beginning of the Hate is a Virus movement transpire, it's been so inspiring, you know. And, you know, similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, this is just like the same thing for Asians, you know. And, you know, I'm just very curious, like, what has been your take on it? And, you know, how do you see the future of Hate is a Virus? And, you know, what kind of work are you planning to put out for this movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think in terms of Hate is a Virus, it's been such an incredible experience being able to work on this initiative together with Brian and Michelle as well, and the rest of the team, Carrie, Sol, Jessica, and so many more, Angela, who are all part of this organization as well. And in terms of what the journey has been like a bit, you know, when we first started Hate is a Virus, I think each of us kind of came together because we cared so much about the issue. We had our respective full-time jobs, we're working on our respective companies, but, you know, similar to with BetterBrave, as we saw more of these stories of the hate crimes against Asian Americans come to the surface, we each felt like we had to do something about it. And then the universe brought us together in a way, and we're able to launch this initiative together to tackle the racism against Asian Americans fueled by COVID-19. And in terms of where we're headed, I'm super excited about it as well. So we have 3 primary pillars for Hate is a Virus. So one piece is awareness. We want to continue to raise awareness of the issues of hate and racism against communities through creating, you know, really digestible, accessible, educational content, and publishing that on our social media channels and spreading the word about that in partnership with community organizations, leaders, and advocates. The second pillar that we have is related to education. So we realize that it's not enough to just raise awareness of these issues through a hashtag campaign, right? We need to actually equip our community with tactical strategies on how to take action against this hate and racism. And something that's really important to us is to really mobilize and equip our Asian American communities to stand up for our own communities as well as other communities, especially in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. And then the final pillar for us and what we're focused on is really continuing to fundraise for different causes that are tackling these issues as well. So we're continuing to raise money for our Raise a Million Fund to support small businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. And we'll be hosting more fundraisers in the future as well to serve wherever we can.
That's amazing. So powerful. Great job to the both of you guys. I know you guys were able to raise almost $20,000 in 2 hours. So that is super amazing. And I fully believe and 100% agree with everything that you said. I feel like as Asians, we need to do our part. and if we're not able to support other communities, then it's very hard for us to see our community grow as well. Right. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I mean, prior to working with Tammy, I always heard the legend of Tammy. People were telling me like, Tammy's super sweet, super smart, super on top of it. And I was like, who's Tammy? Who's this Tammy person I keep hearing about? But you definitely live up to your reputation. It's been a true honor to work with you and Michelle. Like, you're so smart, you're so sharp in every single way. Like, I don't have anything negative to say about you, to be honest. And it's a super honor to be working with you on this project.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
One thing I'm kind of curious about too, as you are accomplishing and working on so many things, what is your relationship with your parents as of this point? Like, what did they think of Tammy Cho, like their daughter? They look at you and be like, okay, what is Tammy doing? Tammy's always doing all these things, So what is your relationship with your parents right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thankfully it's good with my parents. It's funny, I was such like a good kid growing up. And then my parents never thought I was going to rebel. And then I guess my form of rebellion was starting a company and leaving school. Yeah.
So fast.
I was saving it up for that moment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You have to give me a break. I was good up until this time.
Yeah. Yeah, but at this point, I think my parents have given up, not on me, but just on the fact of like me pursuing a traditional path. I think at this point I remember having a conversation with my parents about less than a year ago, actually, where they were telling me that they finally realized that we're just from different generations. And there might actually be more information that I know about this current generation, the current state of the world, that they might not be aware of. And so that they have to just trust that based on that information, and they've raised me well enough to be able to take all that in and make decisions for myself, no matter how unconventional and rebellious it may seem to them. And I think, it's been really heartwarming to hear that from them and hear their encouragement. They still like occasionally ask me if I'm planning on like joining Google or something at some point. But generally it's been good.
I love that.
That's really awesome to hear, because my mom has had a similar conversation with me, and she was like, she sat down next to me and she's like, hey son, there's nothing I can teach you in life anymore. The rest is up to you. I fully trust your ability and your character and your sense of righteousness to do the right things when no one's looking. And that's really powerful. And that story really resonated with me a lot. It's almost like a handing of the baton or something, next generation, to have that trust. And that feels great. Like, I'm pretty sure like you can relate to, like, all my life my mom was like, why are you not a doctor? Why are you not a dentist? Can you stop doing this? Can you stop doing that? But now it's like we have full control, and it's the best feeling in the world. That's also kind of scary at the same time. Oh crap, and parents have full trust in me. What do I do with this power?
I know. Too much power.
Yeah. I think in Asian households, it's like very often, it's common that Asian parents, they want to look after us when we're younger, right? Because they know that they have control over you, and they've immigrated here, just left everything in their home country, and they like envision this future for their kids, right? But as we grow older, it's like they get kind of laid back because they don't have that much control anymore.
I'm pretty sure by the time we have kids, we're gonna be like, why are you not following down this path? Why are you getting a full-time job again? I don't get it. Be an entrepreneur. But we're super excited to have you in the podcast today. We learned so much about you, so much great stories and like stuff that will affect people looking up to you and want to do the same thing as you, So Tammy, like, what is some last advice that you can give to early female entrepreneurs who want to pursue down this path of entrepreneurship and the challenges that they're going to face?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think the piece of advice that I would give, especially in regards to entrepreneurship generally too, is that I think it's very important to focus on your mental health and wellness, and also do some self-reflection about why you're making, why you plan to do what you want to do. Because I think oftentimes it's easy to get caught up in what society expects of us, or we get caught up in the glamour of being a tech founder, or being an entrepreneur, right? I think there's an element of glamorizing that occupation now. But I think it's really important to really understand why you're doing it, and stay grounded in that, because the entrepreneurial journey is a series of ups and downs, and like the lows are super low, right? And so I think that's really important to recognize. And then the second piece I would say too is it's really challenging. I mean, I personally find it challenging, but to continue to practice separating work from your sense of identity and your sense of worth. I think especially for entrepreneurs, oftentimes we feel like if our company is not doing well, we're not capable, and we're not enough. But the reality is that we're taking huge leaps of faith and taking risks and actually doing something out there, right? And when we're taking these action steps, we may make mistakes along the way, but that's just part of the journey. And we just need to acknowledge that and kind of forgive ourselves and just keep growing from it.
Yeah.
That's very sound advice right there. Yeah.
Hey, Tammy, you want to ask?
Yeah. So how can our listeners learn more about you on social media or anywhere?
Yeah. So you can follow our social media handles for the organizations at on Instagram at We Are BetterBrave, and then at HATEISAVIRUS. And then my personal handle is at Tammy Cho on Instagram as well. And then in terms of learning more about our organizations, you can also go to hateisavirus.world and betterbrave.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, Tammy. It was great listening to your story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We're honored. Thank you.
Yeah, and all that you do through Asian Hustle Network too. It's just so incredible to see the community that you've built, and just, during these crazy times too, just seeing how the community has been really supportive and uplifting each other.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Thanks, Tammy. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the show.
We would like to get to the top 10 on iTunes, so be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We release an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned.
Thank you guys so much.